It seems to me that for this project, it's been set up in a way that you would be required to use behavioural design patterns. So a lot of what you'll be doing is trying to persuade people or trying to change behaviour, influence behaviour, trying to get people to do things that you want them to do, maybe for their own good, but still you're partly taking away some of their autonomy. And as I've mentioned in previous lectures, this is something that we need to take seriously. Let's begin by looking at what behavioural design is. Behavioural design is sometimes known as behaviour design, sometimes called persuasive design, and sometimes even called seductive design. The idea is that behavioural design is an approach that allows designers to influence user behaviour, to help users achieve goals that perhaps are difficult to reach. For example, changing habits, changing behaviour that they're used to doing, perhaps changing antisocial behaviour or behaviour that's not really thought through and has effects on other people. It does this by applying recent research in areas such as cognitive neuroscience and behavioural economics to help develop user experiences that help make achieving these goals easier, perhaps more fun. It does this by trying to help us develop what might be called better, and the better is in scare quotes, better habits. Let me give you an example of a behavioural design approach in order to help you perhaps a little bit more easily understand the idea of behavioural design. This will make it more concrete for you. This is a model called the Hook model, and it was developed by a guy called Nain Erjal. I'm maybe not pronouncing that correctly, in a book called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. This model, as you can see, is divided into 4 quadrants. On the top left you have the trigger quadrant. Triggers can be external, for example, perhaps a push notification on your mobile phone, or an email, or a reply. And they can also be internal, where in fact instead of the trigger coming from outside, it's a trigger that you yourself create. You go maybe to a website to find something out, so the trigger is that you want to achieve something, and you do it from within yourself rather than have some sort of push notification to do it. The second quadrant on the upper right is the action quadrant. This is the point where the user perhaps takes some action. On basis of a trigger, they then take action. For example, maybe they go to their timeline on Facebook. Once they've gone there, we move down into the bottom right quadrant. In this quadrant, they get a reward. Now, an important issue here is that a reward is not guaranteed, and it varies. Interestingly, we actually like variable rewards. If you look, for example, at films of people in Las Vegas using the gambling machines, the ones where you put money in, pull a lever, and you maybe win, maybe you don't, we actually become slightly addicted to the idea of variable rewards. Once you've got the variable reward, the next phase is the bottom left, and this is where you actually make an investment. So you do something that will hopefully lead to some reward later. So you invest something, and then hopefully that investment leads to an internal trigger, which then completes the process again. Let me give you an example based on perhaps a timeline thing on Facebook. So maybe there's an external trigger. You get a push notification to say that a friend of yours has posted a lovely cat picture on their Facebook timeline. You go to the timeline, that's the action. You get the variable reward, and this might be a nice, lovely looking picture of a cat. So you're happy you've got the reward for the cat, but then you think, oh, I've got a great cat picture. So this time you invest by putting your own picture on the timeline. At this point, if you're lucky, and if people have liked your cat picture, then you'll get another trigger. It may be an external trigger that you get a push notification to say you've got a like, but it may be internal. You decide to go and look for yourself to see if someone likes your cat picture. So that internal trigger, and internal triggers are generally better than external triggers. You take action, you go to the Facebook, your timeline, so that's the action, and then you look, and maybe someone's written a nice post or they've given it a thumbs up. At this point, you then get your variable reward. If you don't get the reward, maybe that's not such a big issue. Maybe you post another cat picture, or maybe you say something like, thank you very much for the nice comments that you got. This again leads to a trigger. You can see the idea of this is to develop a habit where you start to become a regular user of something like Facebook. You can see this model an awful lot in modern interaction design, and this is quite a common design pattern. This is a behavioral design pattern. It's using different elements of different patterns, but the idea is that it tries to help you create a habit by giving you rewards, but also by asking you to invest in order to get triggered. So this is an example of a behavioral design approach. Now, the question I have to ask at this point is, I've argued in earlier lectures that autonomy, the idea that you can make your own decisions about action, is incredibly important. If this is the case, is it actually acceptable ever to try and design another person's behaviour? My argument would be that in fact it's almost impossible not to. Essentially, as a designer, there's no way around it. You've got no choice. In a way, your job is to design behaviour. It seems to me that there are a number of reasons why, as designers, we have no choice but to try and design behaviour. For example, sometimes we have to design behaviour because some people don't want to do what is considered to be good. Given that we can morally justify the idea of good that we want to design in the first place, it seems fairly acceptable to try and design behaviour in order to help people or to make people more safe. The example here is speed or traffic calming measures that try and reduce the speed of drivers through in a built-up area, perhaps with children or with lots of people who live in the area. So the speed bumps, the signs, etc. are all designed to try and influence the behaviour. Another reason we might want to consider designing behaviour for people is to help them do something that they know they ought to do or they want to do, but given the heat of the moment, they may not be able to do it. The example here is from a bag tour, and I've chosen this one because this seems to be a fairly seems to be a woman who likes cute things, but you'll notice that one of the contents of her bag is a condom. In a way, what she's doing is she's trying to design her behaviour. Maybe she knows that she should always have sex with protection, but maybe in the heat of the moment she might not do that unless she has a condom available. So by putting this condom in her bag, she's designing it so that she can help herself do something later that she knows she should be doing. A third example is because we can help people do something that they want to do, but they can't because they get the benefit immediately and the costs of it come later. For example, eating this lovely looking ice cream sundae might not actually do very much to affect your weight now, but if you keep doing it, then what will happen is you'll put on weight and you may become sick because you're too heavy. In this case, we can help people do things they want to do, perhaps by letting them understand the costs immediately. So it becomes less attractive to get the benefit now because they start to see the costs more clearly. This is an example that you could use perhaps to change habits of eating. Another example is we can't do what is good because we don't do it very often and it's very difficult. For example, doing the right thing when selling a house is quite difficult. We don't sell houses very often, we don't buy houses very often. In my lifetime, I've managed to buy 3 different houses, and the process was very, very complex. In fact, I wanted someone to help me through the process, perhaps even design the process for me, because it was too complex, and I didn't do it often enough. Another reason we want to be good, but we can't be good, is that we take action now, and the feedback of whether that was a good action comes later. So a good example of this is pensions. When I started working at Sony, I was automatically made a member of the pension scheme. If I'd been given the choice at the time, I probably wouldn't have taken the choice to join the pension scheme because I had no feedback to help me decide whether that's a good action. So the fact that the default was to join the pension was actually better for me. It designed my behaviour, but it did it to help me deal with the fact that The action now didn't have any feedback, and I had no way to work out what the feedback would be. Another reason that you can possibly design behaviour is that you want to be good, but you can't because you don't actually know what you like. On this example, this is a plate of insects. If you go to a restaurant and you have complete freedom to choose what you want, you might end up with purchasing this, and you might not know that you like it. So if you were in sort of a restaurant that had these very odd types of food, it might be a good idea to help people work out what they like. So it might be worth saying on the menu, this item contains insects. One more reason you might not want to choose is actually you don't really care. This is a very old example, that's why there's no source on it. I can't remember where I found it, but this is an old system for downloading files, and you can see a huge list of files. It's a very, very long list of places where you can download things, and you can choose between all these servers. But to be quite honest with you, why would you? Fortunately, at the top on the right, there is a button that says select best server. But imagine that wasn't there. Would you as a user really want to choose every time which server you're going to use? Quite often, choice is actually not a good thing. Imagine going to the supermarket and there's 400 different brands of toothpaste. In a way, that doesn't make your life easier, it makes your life more difficult. So sometimes as users, actually we can't be bothered to choose. So as designers, it's probably sometimes very good to just give the user less choice because it makes their life easier and it makes them happier.